Hey everyone, welcome back to the Board Game Spotlight. Today we're going to look at Castle Van Logen. This is a game for 3 to 6 adventurers. It plays in about 90 to 180 minutes. So let's take it to the table and I'll tell you about it. In Castle Van Logen, players are going to play this adventure-style dungeon crawl where you're set in this alternate universe, you've time traveled, and so players are going to start the game by choosing a role. We have a tactician, a scout, an infiltrator, a medic, psychiatrist, and a scientist. So we're playing, I've set up for a 3-player game today to show you just how the game flows and what you're going to do. Now, to begin the game, the group is going to need to determine if they're going to play the story mode or if they're just going to play the exploration mode. Now, the exploration mode is a semi-cooperative game where there is a clear winner at the end of it, whereas the story mode progresses through that deck of cards. I'm not going to spoil this for you. I'm going to walk you through what the exploration mode looks like. You're going to set up all of the rooms, and you'll see that this castle has a number of different rooms from red, green, and blue, different icons. These are search tokens. Every player is going to start with 5 energy spheres. Energy spheres are used as the main currency for equipping and utilizing different artifacts and weapons and abilities. Each player is going to have an asymmetric ability, so the psychiatrist is going to be able to choose to have initiative. Initiative allows players to gain an additional combat card during the combat step. The medic obviously is going to heal the group, and that's important because we are going to share not only health, but clarity. Clarity is kind of your focus, it's your mind. Again, you're time travelers, so if you're not focused, you're not going to do well. And so clarity, each of these has a clarity icon stating that they cannot use this ability unless the clarity token is 6 or higher for the psychiatrist, 5 or higher for the medic, and so that's different depending on whichever character you're playing as. The game flows in a number of different phases. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to start here in this pod, and your first phase is going to be to move. Now, when you're outside the castle, you can move to any of these doors, but let's go ahead and start here in the main entrance of the castle. We will move into this location. After movement, you're then going to resolve an event based on the color type of the room you have entered. So we'll go to green and we will draw and resolve the top event. This is the professor. So there's text that you can read to really get into the story, and then there's choices to make, ranging A, B, C, and D. Now the group is going to make decisions for themselves. So each player has these choice cards, and depending on whatever outcome they want to pick, they will then secretly choose one of these cards, place it face down. When everybody's ready, we'll reveal those. Then you'll move into the outcome of the choices you made. So in this instance, we chose D, and D would allow us to gain 1 health point. Unfortunately, we're at 15. You cannot gain any more than that, but we didn't lose any life or clarity. However, we did not draw a treasure card. That would have been helpful. Now, at the end of the event, there is a resolution. The event ending here is that we summon 2 enemies if we're playing a 3 to 4 player game, and 3 enemies if we're playing 5 to 6. Now, these enemies are going to come from the colored deck of whatever event we resolve. So we're in the green room, so that means we'll draw green enemies. So these are the 2 enemies that we are going to fight for this combat round. Now, if you do not draw any enemies off the resolution of the event, you're going to have to flip this enemy alert coin. This thing is heavy. And it's really, really nice. So heads, you're fine. Tails, it's bad. You're going to summon 2 enemies. You would flip this coin and that would determine your outcome. We do, however, have enemies that we're going to have to face. This enemy is not going to give us any loot for defeating it, but this thief is going to give us a treasure of the color of the room we're in. So we're in the green room, so all of our resolutions and events come from green. So we'll draw treasure cards from this green treasure deck once we defeat these enemies. These enemies have their level, their weakness, and their health. They also give you whatever happens when they attack. So if this enemy attacks and is not defeated, Then each player will lose 1 energy sphere. And then a trophy comes into play during the exploration mode. A trophy is how you're accumulating points at the end of the game. And we'll get to that after the combat. So during combat, there are a number of phases to combat as well. So in combat, we're first going to choose any weapons. Now at the beginning of the game, all we have are our hands. We're just using unarmed melee combat. We don't have any treasures. We don't have any equipment yet. We've not drawn any, so we're kind of weak right now. We need to gather treasure as quickly as possible to try to be able to clear out the blue, which are more difficult rooms, and then the red, which are very difficult rooms. So moving into the combat, each player is going to draw 5 of their combat cards. Your deck has 30 cards in it. You're going to draw 5. Each of these cards is going to have a priority level. So let's take a look at what we have. There are 3 different priority levels, ranging 1, 2, and 3. So this aid card is priority 1. This counter is 3. This miss does nothing for us. It's just a dead card in our hand we need to try to get rid of if we can. And then this hit and critical hit are both priority 2. So during combat, each player will look at their hand of cards and they can choose to play priority 1 first. So each player would look at their hand. We could play this priority 1, which means that we could choose another player within reach. And reach is just a term that means a player that's adjacent to you, so to your left or your right, and they can discard any 1 combat card. Now, that is important because when it comes to priority 3, these are cards that end up hurting you. You don't want these cards in your hand. So anytime that you can use cards to get rid of those, that's very important. So we could choose another player and they could look through their hand of cards to see if there's anything that they may want to get rid of. We would choose a player. So there could be a little table talk. You can't outright say, this is what I have in my hand. It would be great if we could get rid of this. But you could say, I'm feeling okay. I don't need help, or I could really use some help. And this would be a card that a player really wants help with. This hard counter is going to be pretty detrimental to the group. Because remember, we share health. So we're going to lose the game if we lose all of our health. And so we want to try to ensure that does not happen. So after we do priority 1 cards, we can move into priority 2 cards. Priority 2 cards are the meat of combat. This is when we get to deal damage to the enemies. And so critical hits, ignore your combat power. Your combat power is always equal to the number of fists you have. So if you have equipped weapons or shields that give you power, you can play cards equal to that number. After you have finished dealing damage, so if we were to play this critical hit for 1 and this hit for another damage, we would take our damage tokens from our player and we would choose an enemy type. Again, all players would do that. So if this player were to deal 2 damage here, and then this player dealt 2 damage there, 2 damage to the hound, and we have 4 damage to the thief. So after you have finished with your damage, you're then going to check the enemy attack. Now, this thief has been defeated, but this hound, he's angry. He is not happy. So he's going to attack and we're going to lose a health point. We're going to lose an additional health point if there are any damage on this enemy. So we're going to lose 2 health as a group. And then we're going to go back through the combat step because we have an enemy that's not been defeated. So any cards that were played are discarded. Again, these level 3 counter cards are going to deal the group damage and they are just discarded, but you are going to take damage for those. And then any other card that was played in priority 1 is discarded as well. These miss cards cannot be discarded unless you take a recuperation. Recuperation essentially means you're out of combat for the round. You are going to draw your hand limit, but then you're going to discard all the cards in your hand, which allows you to get rid of this miss, which is important. So we would then go through another round of combat, drawing up to 5 cards. So we have our hand of 5 cards. And then we can choose to deal some more damage. Now, this union attack is really interesting. During phase 1, if another player has a union attack, we can reveal these together, and then we can pay energy spheres and place 3 damage tokens. So I could reveal this card, and this player could reveal their union attack. And then we could spend energy spheres and we could end up killing the hound by placing all of our tokens on that enemy type. When all the enemies are defeated, you'll then go into the cleanup step. Now in exploration, the cleanup step is a little different than the story mode. In story mode, you're trying to survive, you're trying to defeat the enemies. However, in exploration, you're also trying to gain these as trophies. So this is going to be worth 2 data points at the end of the game for me. Then you're going to go into the reward step. So all players who did at least 1 damage during combat, they're going to gain energy spheres based on the level of character. So green is going to give them 1 energy sphere for each defeated enemy. So everybody that dealt damage is going to gain 2 energy spheres for killing these green enemies. It would be 2 energy spheres for blue and 3 energy spheres for red. And again, the energy spheres are ways that you pay for combat cards and for treasure cards that we can find in the dungeon. We're then going to determine the reward order. Now, this is something that's unique to this game, is the reward order, because if we have loot to draw, then the player who has the most damage tokens out is going to become first, and then it prioritizes from there with the player who has the second most and then the person who has the last. So we're going to draw a green treasure card for each player that dealt damage during this combat. Now these are typically hidden, but we're going to go ahead and show you. So each player is going to know the card they drew. They're not going to know the other card the other players drew. You're going to look at your card and then you're going to give it back to the first player, the group leader. The group leader is going to draw a treasure card and add a random one to the stack. And then we're going to shuffle these up. And then we're going to auction them off. So for each icon, treasure icon out there, you're going to be able to gain 1 reward. So each player is going to be able to take 1 reward. And this track's going to allow you to keep track of that. So we're going to open up with this sword. So this is an item that we found. We looted this off a dead enemy. So we could say the first player, do you want this sword? And the first player, whoever did the most damage, would say, no, I don't want that sword. Then it would go in order. So another player could say, I'll take the sword. So then they could take that sword. We'll reveal the next card. We have a health potion. Again, it goes to the player who did the most damage, and so on and so forth. And these are going to be dealt out until you've gone through all the cards. Any cards that were not taken are shuffled back into the deck. And so now we have items that are going to help us progress through the castle. One-handed weapons or items can go inside one of these locations. If you draw a 2-handed weapon, such as this hammer, you'll see 2 hands. Those are placed here to indicate it's taking up both sides of the inventory. Players can hold a number of inventory slots. You can have 6 in your backpack. So there are large and small items that players will find, and they can store those, and they can be anything that is gained through other tokens can be kept secret from other players. And so there is some hidden information within the game as well. So after the reward phase, players are then going to go into finishing their refresh phase. So this is the last phase of the game. The refresh phase is going to allow players to take different actions. So we have, during the refresh phase, you can rest to gain a health point. So the group would gain a health point. You can recharge. Recharging is going to gain 3 energy spheres for that character. You can search. So to search, you would take the top search token of that location, reveal it, and you would resolve it. So in this case, this character would gain 4 energy spheres. So they would go up 4. Sneaking is something that is very risky. You need to be careful with this because it's going to use clarity. And remember, clarity is something that the group shares. So you're going to pay a clarity, and then you're going to draw a treasure card that matches an adjacent room. So we are currently in this location, so we could draw a green treasure if we wanted to draw. And here we have a mace, so that would help out. We then have a choice. We can either do an enemy alert check, which is to flip the coin again. And remember, heads is good, tails is bad. Or we could pay 4 energy spheres to sneak past the enemies in that room. Once you finish performing your actions during the refresh, you can disenchant cards. You can discard cards and gain -2 their value, so this would be 6. You could gain 6 energy spheres. You'll then change the leader. The leader will go from the current leader to the next player. You'll then perform a clarity check. If the group's clarity ever reaches 0, every time at the end of the round, you'll lose a health forward for that. And then you're going to clear the room. When you've finished resolving events in that room, you'll place a cleared room token to remind you you've been there and you've completed it, and the group will need to move on to a new room. So again, Castle Van Logan is a dungeon crawl, and you're going to be able to do a number of really interesting things, especially with these events. You're going to have different choices you can make that may or may not help you. They may help the group, they may hurt the group. The story mode is going to progress through an actual story. It is finished when you reach the very last card of that deck. There are a lot of these treasures, and just showing them off, they get progressively better as you start to clear the decks from blue to red. You're going to be able to gain stronger items, stronger weapons. This legendary stack of weapons is going to be able, if you find all the pieces to this Letherium, there are a number of shards to this weapon scattered in these decks. If you have them all, you can equip, you can create this legendary weapon. Same with these different hammers, and there is these parts to these skulls that you can find throughout the game. Another aspect that is really interesting is a time jump. Now, players can spend 10 energy spheres to make a time jump. And what that consists of is going from one location and going to another board. So when you time jump, when you time warp, you're going to move from a previous board. You're then going to place out all the tokens where they would go, and then you're going to need to place your group token back in the room you were in. And again, there are a number of other maps that you can jump to. The story mode is going to jump your group for you, but in the exploration mode, players can spend 10 energy spheres to go ahead and time jump, and that's going to allow them to go to different areas. So the time travel aspect is very, very interesting, and it's a really cool mechanic as far as changing the board and exactly your different layouts on being able to move throughout the castle. So this has been your overview of Castle Van Logan. Again, it is a dungeon crawl adventure game for 3 to 6 players. If this sounds like something that's interesting to you, take a look at the description below for a link to their Kickstarter page. This has been Derek with the Board Game Spotlight, and we'll catch you next time.